What is Kyle Dubas planning for Rickard Rakell? His name has been in trade talks for quite some time. Dubas is weighing his options of whether or not to trade Rickard Rakell, knowing that the package he could get in return would contain prospects and draft picks that could really help this team out. Rakell just got granted an opportunity that none of us saw coming. We're going to talk about all of that and more on this episode of Penguins Digest. It was breaking news this morning that Rickard Rakell is being given this unbelievable opportunity at the Four Nations face-off. So we're going to break that down in just a second. We're over 1,000 subscribers. Finally, that was our goal. But now our next goal is 2,000 subscribers. So continue to hit that sub button and help us get to our goal. Thank you so much. And let's get into the action. We have to talk about Rickard Rakell because he has a huge opportunity in front of him. He is going to be playing on the first line for Team Sweden. We really didn't see this coming because he was listed as an injury replacement. He didn't even get named to Sweden's team off the bat. He was supposed to be like a fourth line player for them and not really even have a chance to play and showcase his skill. But now, being on the first line, that is a significant difference from what we were expecting. And Rakell is going to be able to increase his trade value exponentially if he shows out at this Four Nations faceoff. This is the best case scenario for the Pittsburgh Penguins and Kyle Dubas if he really does plan on trading Rickard Rakell, because he actually gets to play alongside the best players on his team against the best players on other country teams. We're going to get to see what he does alongside other really high-level talent outside of just Sidney Crosby, because we saw what that did for Rickard Rakell's career trajectory, and now he has this opportunity to play alongside Mika Zibanejad and Nylander, and it's just going to be a really fun thing to see. Will Rickard Rakell produce at a high level and continue to up the ante on his trade value as this season goes on? He is 31 years old, on pace for a career best season this year, and his salary is such a bargain. $5 million for a 30-plus goal scorer. That is a heck of a return for the sniper, something that Dubas is going to have to consider, because in the open market, he's going to command a lot more than that. Rickard Rakell has 25 goals already this season. He's on pace to reach almost 40 goals this season, and he has been an absolute force on the offensive end all year long. He's also up there in blocked shots for forwards in the National Hockey League, so he's a really solid two-way player. He is a first-line winger through and through. At 31 years old, in the prime of his career, for that cap hit, this is a dude that a lot of people are going to keep their eyes on. And as far as trade value and returns, I want to analyze the Jake Guentzel trade. Jake Guentzel and Ty Smith, which was kind of a throw-in, went to Carolina, and the Penguins in return got Michael Bunting, Ville Koivunen, Vasily Ponomarev, and Cruz Lucius, as well as a second-round pick. It was a conditional first that became a second, and the Penguins drafted Harrison Brunick with that pick. So they were able to get 5 really solid assets from that trade, getting rid of Jake Guentzel, and that was when Guentzel was a rental. So imagine what they can get for a guy that is actually under team control for multiple more seasons at a very team-friendly cap hit that is producing just as well as Jake Guentzel was. Now, Rakell's a little bit older, but I don't think you can start these negotiations without mentioning a first-round pick. That is the bare minimum starting point in acquiring Rickard Rakell, knowing that Kyle Dubas values him tremendously, and the Penguins aren't just going to give him away. They're going to need significant assets in return, and that's why I shouted out the Jake Guentzel trade from last year's deadline. They'll also have their first young crop of prospects coming up to make an impact next season. So that really opens the door to move out some of these other players, such as Rickard Rakell. All the money the Penguins are going to have in free agency, what are they going to choose to do? Keeping Rakell around likely doesn't tank his value. So as well as he's producing this year, even if he does increase his trade value over the course of the Four Nations faceoff, the Penguins could opt to just keep him and ride out this season with a guy that's going to score close to 40 goals. If they get rid of him, it's going to hurt Crosby as well. So it is a tough decision for Dubas to make, but we have to weigh all the options. If he's really trying to rebuild on the fly, he's probably not going to trade Rickard Rakell, but if he's opting for more of a full rebuild and he's starting to believe that this team really does need to hit the reset button, then I do believe Rickard Rakell could indeed be on the move. So that's something to consider moving forward. The Penguins can't trade everybody. That's the truth of the story. They cannot trade everybody. They already have as many draft picks as they could possibly want, and NHL-ready prospects on the verge with more prospects and talent on the way. We talked about Brunick. He was one of the big assets that came over in that Gensel trade. All three of those main players from that trade, Koivunen, Ponomarev, and Brunick, are going to be NHL players next year, and I can say that with confidence. So the Penguins have plenty of young talent and star power to throw into the lineup where they don't necessarily need to keep Rickard Rakell, but I would prefer it. And if you weigh both of the options, should they actually trade Rickard Rakell? The answer is likely not, and my answer would be no, just because of what he's done for this team and his production, and you can't just trade your number one goal scorer. But if they're going to offer me a haul, such as the Jake Gensel trade multiplied, because obviously Jake Gensel was a rental, this is going to be that plus more. So I don't know if it's something Kyle Dubas can refuse if a team really gets desperate for scoring. The other reason why he can't refuse it is because look at the salary cap going up. This is an argument for why we should keep Rickard Rakell, because his $5 million cap hit is hardly anything compared to what the cap is going to be. So when this report came out that the salary cap was going to rise, it changed a lot of teams' strategies moving forward. They're not as inclined to sell pieces off because they understand that they're going to have money to work with. And the Penguins might be in a better situation than any other team, assuming the Penguins move out all of their unrestricted free agents, which I would assume they will. They will have more than $29.5 million in cap space this summer. And that's insane. That's something that they have never had as long as I can remember. So sure, there are other teams that have really big amounts of cap space, such as the Avalanche, the Hurricanes, the Oilers, the Panthers, the Senators. These are all teams competing for a Stanley Cup for the most part. But the difference between those teams and the Penguins is they have to extend players currently on their roster to long-term contracts with significant AAVs. For the Penguins, they're pretty much set with what they have, and they're not going to be extending anybody anytime soon. There might be a couple role players that might get contracts. I'm thinking Cody Glass, Philip Tomasino, but nobody major is going to be getting big contract extensions from the Penguins and no hefty raises, which means they're going to have more money. So it's kind of a big deal that the Penguins are in this situation because they don't have the same issue that all these other teams have. Michael Bunting might be one of the few players that they might actually have to extend, but he won't even have a huge cap hit. I'm not seeing him getting paid more than maybe $5.5 million. So it's very interesting to look at the Penguins' current cap situation and the players that they have. Malkin will likely retire after next season, opening up $6 million in additional cap space, and then their core will remain the same. Bunting, Rust, Rakell, Karlsson, Letang, all pretty much affordable outside of Karlsson. So the Penguins have this really solid core of players. Crosby, I would expect him to play even more seasons than his current contract as well. And then the Penguins have him in that mix because I can't see him putting him on another jersey in his NHL career either. But the Penguins are in a very good spot where they have these veterans that are bargain contracts, cheap young talent pushing for the roster. They have 3 years of insanely good draft picks, insane draft capital, so many picks and such good positions to be in to draft really solid talent. And then the $29.5 million cap space, it's insane. I mean, they could go out there and sign, like I talked about last video, a guy like Mitch Marner, a guy like Sam Bennett, and then trade a draft pick for a pending RFA like Mason McTavish, like Gabe Vilardi. And then they would still have money left over. It would be an amazing offseason for the Penguins. They could completely 180 this team around if Kyle Dubas plays his cards right. And if you look at the team needs, they need a top 4 left defenseman. They need a bottom pair right defenseman, a second line center, a top 6 winger, a third line center. It's not easy. It's no easy task. But some of the prospects they have coming up could easily take some of these spots and play in those roles. Their goaltending situation is actually solid if you look at how deep they are in the farm with all of these options. One of them will pan out. And Alex Nedeljkovic is that veteran presence at an affordable cap hit as well because of that great signing by Kyle Dubas. Kyle Dubas has more flexibility than probably any other general manager in the entire National Hockey League, so his plan is wide open. He does hold his cards very close to his chest, which I respect that for Kyle Dubas. He says a lot of stuff, but he doesn't say anything specific. Every time we ask him, oh, what are you going to do? He says, I'm trying to acquire young NHL-ready talent. He pretty much says the exact same thing every time. So I like that about Kyle Dubas because other teams aren't keyed in on what he's trying to do, and he can kind of surprise other teams as much as he's surprising us fans as well. So it's really fun to see how Kyle Dubas is going to play this game of chess. He's not playing checkers, ladies and gentlemen. He is playing chess. So I'm very excited to see how this plays out. Dubas has all the assets he could possibly need, all the money he could possibly need to make this team better again and a playoff contender sooner rather than later. So Rakell, first line player now for Team Sweden. We're going to get to see a ton of ice time against a ton of high-level talent with high-level talent on his side. Rakell is going to set the stage here in the Four Nations face-off and help his value tremendously if he can perform at a high level starting tomorrow against Team Canada. Have to talk about Rakell because it is the Four Nations face-off break, and we talked about Crosby yesterday, so Rakell today because we might as well highlight our Penguins players that are being featured in this tournament. Thank you guys for watching. Subscribe to the channel, Penguins Digest, and we'll see you on the next episode.